Hello everyone, I am Snigdha Kakkad and this is my channel Accelerate AI Careers. Today I'm going to discuss a very important LeetCode question, LeetCode 57, insert interval. It is one of the blind 75 questions and it has been asked in several interviews in last 6 to 12 months. Some of the major companies, Amazon, Microsoft, Netflix. So let's see what does the question say. We have discussed merge intervals LeetCode 56 yesterday. So this is just an extension of that question. We have been given an array of non-overlapping intervals which are already sorted. And every element of that intervals array is intervals I, which is depicted by a start of the interval and an end index of the interval. And all those intervals are non-overlapping. They are sorted already. And you have been given a new interval which you have to insert in this array of intervals. It has also been provided as an instruction that you do not need to modify the intervals array in place. You can make a new array and return it. That means you can use additional memory to return the new intervals. Let's look at some examples here. For example, you have been given an input 1, 3, 6, 9 and your new interval is 2, 5. So I have shown you that example on the timeline here. On the axis, you can see that there is a difference of 2 in each and every consecutive index. And I have shown 1, 3 and 6, 9 given to you as here. And the new interval 2, 5 here. So there is an overlap between the intervals 1, 3 and the new interval 2, 5. If there is an overlap, you have to merge these intervals. And how do you merge them? You need to take the min of the start indices, that is min of 1, 2, which would be 1. And you need to take the max of end indices, which would be 3, 5 max, which would be 5. And hence your new interval which you need to return have been shown in red dotted lines here. So the new intervals would be 1, 5 and 6, 9. Why I have not merged the other two? Because there is no overlap between 1, 5 and 6, 9. Had there been an overlap, say suppose instead of 6, 9, it would have been 5, 9. Then I would have merged them and 1, 5 and 5, 9 would have led to 1, 9. So this clears two things. One thing is if the start index of the next one is equal to the end index of the first one, then it is considered as an overlap. That is, instead of 6, 9, if you would have had 5, 9, then it would have been considered as an overlap, and then you have to do the merge and then return the output. You cannot directly return the output as is. And the second thing which is clarified it, how we are going to merge. We're going to take the min of all the start indices and max of all the end indices of the intervals involved within the overlap. I hope this is clear. Let's look at the second example. Now in example 2, you have been given 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 16. As you can see, this intervals array is already sorted by start indices and your new interval is 4, 8. So if you have to see where all the overlap is and then merge them, you would see the start indices first, right? So you would compare start index 4 with 1 and you see that 4 is greater than 1. Then you would check the start index 4 with end index 2. You can see 4 is greater than 2 as well. So that means it will be after 1, 2. Now you compare 4 with start index 3. So it is greater than 3. But you compare 4 with end index 5, it is less than 5. That means there is an overlap. Now you compare end index 8 with end index 5 and you see that 8 is greater. So there is definitely an overlap. So you need to merge them. So when you merge 3, 5 and 4, 8, you take the min of start indices 3, 4 and min would be 3. And you take the max of end indices which would be 5, 8 and max would be 8. So 3, 8. So 1, 2, 3, 8, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 16 would be your. But again, you can't return it as a result because if you see 3, 8 and 6, 7 still have an overlap. So you will take min of 3, 6 and max of 7, 8. Again 3, 8 would be the result. So 1, 2, 3, 8, 8, 10, 12, 16. I can still see that there is an overlap between 3, 8 and 8, 10. I'll take the min of the min start indices and max of the end indices. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 10 and 12, 16 as you can see the output here. I will explain it to you how we do the overlap, in what scenarios we append it to the result, in what scenarios we check for the other merges. So for that, stay tuned. Now with any new interval given, you could face three scenarios. First scenario being when your new interval given to you has its end index less than start index of this first interval in your intervals array. In your intervals array, it is sorted, right? So your first interval will have the smallest start index. If your given new interval has the end index less than the start index of the first interval, that means it would be less than any of the other ongoing intervals because it is a sorted array. That means you don't need to do anything. You just need to initialize result array and then append first the new interval and then the consecutive all other intervals in the intervals array, because it will come at the start of the array as there is no overlap and your end index of the new interval is less than the minimum array of the array interval. The other case could be that your new interval given to you has the start index which is greater than the end index of the last interval in the arrays. That means, say suppose you have been given an interval starting from 7 and your given array was 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, 6. In this scenario, 7 is greater than 6. That is the start index of your new interval given to you to be inserted is greater than 6, that is the end index of last interval. Since the array is sorted, if the new interval is greater than the last interval in the array, that means it is greater than all the other intervals and it doesn't have any overlap. In that scenario, you will just append it to the result after adding your intervals array as is. So these are your two scenarios. Now what is the third scenario? The third scenario is suppose you have been given an interval, a new interval 0, 3, which shows that there is an overlap with more than one array. So then how do you deal with that? In that case, you don't directly append it to the result. You check first the start index of the new interval 0 and compare it with the start of each interval in the array. So like I pick up 1, 2 and I compare 0 with 1. And I also compare 3 with 2. Okay. So as I can see that 0 is less than 1. So it needs to come prior to this interval. But is there an overlap? How do I check? I need to check the end index of new interval given to you 3 with start index of the given interval 1. So 3 is greater than 1. If it would have been less than 1, then there would not have been any overlap. But since there is an overlap now, I need to take the min of the start indices 0, 1 and max of end indices 2, 3. So my new interval here would be 0, 3. Because min of 0, 1 would be 0 and max of 2, 3 would be 3. So my return interval would be 0, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6. But I cannot append it to the result and return right now because I can notice that there is still an overlap between 0, 3 and 3, 4. So I will take the min of start indices 0, 3, that would be 0, and max of end indices 3, 4, which would be 4. So my return interval would be 0, 4 and 5, 6. Because there is no overlap between 0, 4 and 5, 6, so I can return it as a result. I hope this is clear to you. So our exceptional cases would be if your given new interval does not have an overlap and its end index is less than the start index of the first interval. Then you append it to the new result array, after which you append all of your interval array and return the result. The second case could be that your new interval given to you has a start index which is greater than end index of the last interval. In that case, it would be greater than all and it doesn't have an overlap. So you append it to the result after appending the intervals and return as is. The third case, which is most important, is there is an overlap. In that case, you don't directly append to the result and return. You check for all of the merges possible. You merge them and finally return the result after you have checked for all the merges. I hope the algorithm is clear to you. Now let's start coding it. First of all, I will initialize my result array as an empty list because I can use additional memory and I don't need to replace the result in place in the array. So hence I am creating a new list. Now I will check for I in range length of intervals, which is my given array. And what I need to check, I will compare the new intervals end index. End index can be checked like this. I will check if this new interval end index is less than or greater than the start index of ith interval. So to do that, start index can be taken as 0. So if it is less, then it should come prior to it, right? So if it is that, so I can just append it to the result because it comes prior, and then finally I can return my result plus intervals and whatever intervals come after ith index, because I'm comparing it with the ith index and checking. So if the end index is less than the ith one, it should come prior to it. So hence I append the new interval first and then add all subsequent intervals. I hope this is clear. So this is one case. Now the second would be else if my new start index is greater than or ith intervals end index. So if it is greater, there's no overlap, but it is greater. In that case, I would append result.append. I would append intervals I, because this is smaller and new interval is greater. But I will not return it to the result. I will not append it to the result because we haven't compared new interval with all the subsequent intervals. We have just compared with the ith interval and we have checked that new interval start index is greater than the end index of ith interval. But it could be the scenario that there is a merge needed going forward. So I'm not currently appending new interval here. I just appended intervals I because I have made sure that there is no overlap between intervals I and new interval. Okay, I hope that is clear. Now my else scenario handles everything else. So I will check for new interval and I will apply the merge scenario. And what would be the merge scenario? I will take min of new interval start index and interval ith interval start index, and I'll take max of new end index and intervals ith interval end index. So I hope this is clear. So if we are checking for overlap, we will be taking min of start indices and max of end indices. This is what it is. And once the loop runs and checks for all of the intervals, after that, I can append the new interval to the result because it has found its right place and all the merges have been done. And finally, I can return my result. So this is the entire code. I will just run and check if it works. So it's accepted. Let's sum. So as you can see, our solution is doing really great here. I will just quickly walk you through the solution once more. I'll summarize it for you. If you have any questions, ask in the comments later on. I initialize my result array as an empty list because I can do it using additional memory. And then I run it for the entire range of length of intervals. And I compare the start index of my new interval with the end index of ith interval. If the start index is less than the ith interval, that means I can append new interval to the result freely and there is no overlap. And then finally, I can append all of the remaining intervals going forward from ith index because I have checked for the overlap. Now, second scenario would be that your start index of new interval is greater than your end index of ith interval. In that case, you can append the ith interval there to your result, but you are not sure if there is any overlap going forward of new interval with the subsequent intervals. Hence, you have not appended new interval yet. Now, you handle all of the overlapping scenarios in else. And how do you handle the overlap? You take the min of start indices and max of end indices. That's what I have done here. And finally, you append your new interval to your result in rightful place once the loop has run and you return the result. I hope the solution is clear to you. Any doubts you can ask in the comments. I will be happy to help you with them. If you have a better approach to solve this question, let me know. I would love to learn from you. Subscribe to my channel for your daily notifications of your LeetCode Daily Challenge. Let me know if there is some question which interests you more and you would like me to prioritize it or solve it first. Thank you.